Welcome to Subject to Change. You're here with Jodi Smits-Anderson and Lauren Stanek, and we're talking with Bill Walsh. Hello, sir.
Hello,
Hello.
hello,
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. And I know I've watched some of your shows, and I know you start recording and then you catch your subjects in unguarded moments at the beginning.
Actually, the whole way through. We go for the unguarded moments the whole way through.
Frequently, there seem to be beverages involved up there in Syracuse.
Did you get one or no?
I've got a healthful beverage because I've still got some work to do today.
To lead or to lag? USGBC, there were people trying to get them to say PVCs are no good, and therefore will give you points for eliminating PVC from your building. But they went through a whole working group process and determined they couldn't do that because they didn't know what would be used instead of PVC, and that replacement material might actually be worse. And I admired that stance because the industry wasn't quite ready then. Do you remember when that happened, Bill, or have a reflection on that? Because we might be on opposite sides of that, which is totally fine. It's a learning process, and it's a learning process for me. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. When you see the little microphone in the lower right, click on that to learn more. We're so glad you're here. Refocus, reframe, Jodi gets a new lens.
Yeah, I very, very well remember that because we were kind of central to that debate, which went on for the better part of a decade through all the processes. We first filed some information at the request of the USGBC, I believe in either 2000 or 2001. And I think that final decision came out around 2007. And frankly, I was quite disappointed by it because I felt like it was a political decision, and the organization was under a lot of intense attack from the plastics industry, the specific vinyl industry lobby, the plastics industry. They had also teamed up with the Sustainable Forest Initiative, which was the industry version of FSC light, so much less protective of forests. And so I understand that they were under, but I always looked at that as a huge opportunity missed because to the extent, because they decided not to take any action, right? At that time in Australia, there was a credit for not using PVC in your products, in your projects. And in fact, the Olympics had been done PVC free as a matter of state policy at the time.
Okay.
So it wasn't so much that there were that they were not sure of the alternatives. And again, you would have been talking a voluntary credit for commercial interiors. Is
true.
Where it came
That's
up.
A good point. Right. Yeah. Much softer than how I presented it. Yeah.
So there were many alternatives to be had, and again, it was a voluntary credit. So my view on this is if you have to establish a massively compromised standard for green, what becomes the difference between green and your organization, your status, your certification is called leadership in environmental and energy. That just wasn't leadership, in my opinion.
No, that's a really good point, and it actually illustrates some of the changes that have happened in the U.S. Not to make this about the USGBC, but they actually moved the market away from added urea formaldehyde because they took that stance.
That was the exactly point that we made in our comments.
Yeah. So you really helped me. Like I was appreciative of what I saw as a process of them trying to understand what was reasonable. And that's really too bad. But you're right. If it was an optional credit, and they could have even done another route, they could have said, we identify that it's problematic in these uses, and they could have focused on the uses. You can get rid of vinyl siding without any, I mean, there are plenty of other options. There are some things you can get rid of vinyl shades. There are things that you can actually very clearly eliminate. And in 2001, you could very, very clearly eliminate them without danger. Right. Thanks for making me rethink that a little bit. I need to look at my own history and remember and put this new lens on it.
Some good shifts, some bad.
Well, that was a time of, rapid evolution of the organization and figuring out what it was and how it would relate to all the various stakeholders. Little known recollection of people is that there was at one time the USGB was structured where environmentalists were considered a stakeholder group, much like within FSC, there's an environmental stakeholder group. And during that debate over PVC, that actually evolved, where the USGBC was redefined as a business group and environmentalists, could participate. So that said, you're right, there's been a lot of evolution. First of all, there are other standards like the Living Building Challenge that has a more robust approach to materials. And the USGBC has also moved in its credit system to awarding credits that, among other things, do reward elimination of toxic chemicals and reward increasingly transparency through the health product declaration on what the contents of our chemicals are. So, and the credit that I would give the green building industry and as well as the USGBC is that it has done a lot within the industry to adopt what we call the precautionary approach or the hazard-based analysis of chemicals. And a hazard-based analysis says, okay, what are the potential harmful impacts of this chemical? And can we avoid them through a careful selection of the material or the other chemical, as opposed to the dominant framework of the US law, which is called a risk-based paradigm, where you just because something is toxic, can cause cancer, the estimate of whether it's dangerous will be based on mathematical formulas as to who will be exposed, for how long, and why.
Design for freedom.
But now it's time to raise the consciousness about what we call the externalized costs. So the reason that, and again, PVC is always a very good example of these things because it is a durable material, it's a versatile material. It seems benign, especially now that the phthalates have been, and all the many different additives have been changed. It seems like a fairly benign, maybe it's buried underground. But when you look at the overall life cycle impacts of producing it, you find that it really outstrips all the other plastics, which are based on fossil fuels. None of them are pretty. Even the best, most recyclable plastics have issues. But this one is really an outlier. And but increasingly, your decision not to use PVC will have to be based on having empathy for and solidarity with people who are not the building occupants, but because this is not sustainable for us if it's not sustainable for all. And the only reason that PVC maintains its price advantage, for example, over linoleum, a very similar product, it has a huge price advantage because none of these manufacturing companies are ever being held to account to clean up the dioxin-laden lakes of Louisiana. And it's virtually impossible to track down all the individuals who were poisoned through dioxin releases during the manufacturing process. And I think we should start to look at all of our industrial supply chain that way. And if a company is not willing to put up a live webcam of their manufacturing facility so you can always see it, I think in the future, you see a lot more focus on supply chains today, on ethical supply chains, looking at everything from slave labor to personnel policies to wage policies. And I think that increasingly with that transparency will come greater advantage. You always emphasize, Jodi, the potential, right? The innovation potential, the market potential of ever better products. And I think those are the ones that will thrive moving forward because they can honestly say, well, come visit our manufacturing facility. The executives are breathing the same air as the line people, for example.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be amazing? And it's interesting because, like I always talk about, also that as we make more connections, as we look at the bigger impacts, it becomes messier, right? There's just more things to think about and more inputs that you need in order to make smart choices. And yet that same increase in complexity gives you an increase in opportunity. Right. So I think that's that's really, I feel like the entire design and construction industry hasn't changed fast enough, especially on the construction side, but the process has always tried to get more and more simple. Like, we know how to build, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then we're going to bid it, and then we're going to be fine. I think we have to welcome the complexity if we're going to actually have better, healthier buildings, right? And longer lived buildings that are durable and beautiful. You can't get there by trying to be efficient.
There is great value beyond efficiency.
The real value in your profession is understanding how to go beyond what machine learning can do, right? And
Yeah,
that are
right.
going to, so anyone can use a sketch program and pull together their own sketch of a room. But what the profession really adds to that, in addition to better aesthetics, one would hope, but you understand this is the type of thing you really add to this conversation, is how does one build ethically? How does one build sustainably for the long term? And how does what you're building reflect your own values? And instead of just telling you, well, yes, linoleum is going to be more expensive than vinyl. If you're saying, well, what we're talking about is $60 for your kitchen floor in a $20,000 renovation project. It's, not to have that kind of first pushback, and being informed enough to realize that there are many choices that we can now make that do not cost a dime more and may even be cheaper.
Thanks for joining Subject to Change, a sustainability podcast.
Well, thank you very much. And hope our paths cross again. Hope I see Jodi again.
Yes, same. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.